Hi, welcome to The State Room, podcast dedicated to covering the key issues and events that will define the future of Arizona. I'm your host, Scot Mussi. Today on our program, we're going to be talking about an issue that has both energized and infuriated conservatives here in Arizona for years: election integrity. Voters in Arizona deserve an election system that is safe, secure, and delivers timely election results. It shouldn't be too much to ask that, for example, voters know who's won an election on election night, or that we have strong voter ID requirements, or that we make sure that we keep foreign dollars out of our election. The good news is that this November, there's going to be a measure on the ballot that'll actually address many of these issues. Joining us today in the State Room is Alex Kolodin to talk a little bit about this. Alex is a representative from District 3. He is an election integrity attorney, small business owner, and now candidate for Secretary of State. Alex, thank you for joining us today here in the State Room.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
So how are things going out there? You're on the campaign trail, pretty active?
Oh, yeah. People around the state are fired up, and they're ready to bring the golden age home. You know, we've seen for the past 4 years the catastrophe that having a Democrat executive branch has brought to Arizona, where we went from first in the country in job creation to 47th, where we went from being a state with a stable water supply to having our clock cleaned in terms of the Colorado River negotiation and looking at a very serious cutback next year in terms of the water that our cities and suburbs use. And that's all been brought about by the Hobbs-Fontes administration, which has been an incompetent catastrophe. So people are seeing this, and people are ready to restore a competent Republican executive branch that's going to get it done for the people.
Before we dive into the FAST Act, this ballot referral that's been referred by the legislature that'll be on the ballot in November, when did you get so involved in election integrity issues here in Arizona?
Well, I got so involved back when, I was a baby attorney. I had just hung out a shingle and thought I was kind of going to be a real estate lawyer or whatever, but there was a bipartisan group of people out of Santa Cruz County that was getting concerned about the way they were running elections down there. Put in a very unusual public records request from the metadata from their county's central tabulator computer, and of course the county wouldn't give it to them. So they looked around the state for a lawyer that was willing to take it on. The only guy they could find was me. So 8 months out of law school, I'm there in trial against the Secretary of State's office.
Baptism by fire.
In Santa Cruz County. It's baptism by fire. But we won the case, and my clients discovered that Santa Cruz was printing early voting results before Election Day, which is a big no-no. And I started developing a reputation in the field. And it was a small field back then, so there weren't that many of us who were doing it. And I just got the cases. And now I've been practicing election law for almost 15 years. And eventually I kind of reflected on the case I was doing and go, you know, the reason our elections are so screwed up is that the legislature doesn't know what it's doing. Like, election law is complicated, it's technically complex. And you got people who really don't understand it making those laws. It's naturally going to screw up the system. And that's why I wanted to go in there to do a better job by doing the job myself, which I do believe I've accomplished despite a very challenging situation with divided government.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And since you've been down there working on these different election integrity issues, this last year, the culmination was the FAST Act. You helped lead the charge to get this referred to the ballot in November. So what's in the FAST Act, and what will it do if voters approve it in November?
Well, the FAST Act has the items that Arizonans around the state have been asking for years. Very common sense rules like, hey, for every ballot cast, there's got to be government issued ID. 80+% of Arizonans tell us that they want that. Things like a ban on foreign contributions to Arizona elections, and constitutionalizing our state's common sense requirement that you got to be a citizen in order to vote. You know, Adrian Fontes is in front of the United States Supreme Court right now trying to eliminate parts of that requirement because he wants to make it easier for non-citizens to vote. That's why he allowed people to register to vote in federal races with a social security number, even though you don't have to be a citizen to have a social security number. This is way too radical for Arizona. This entire leftward shift of the Democrat Party towards the Zoran Mondani party, of which Mr. Fontes is a leading part, this is way out of step with the mainstream of Arizona voters and the way they want their elections run. They know our elections have become a catastrophe since Fontes first took an elections administration position and ran his first election in 2018. And so it's time for voters to take this into their own hands, to reform their system, because Mr. Fontes isn't going to do it, and then boot him out of office and put in a competent administrator who will actually know how to administer the laws that the voters have passed effectively.
It's amazing that some of the provisions that you mentioned that haven't been able to get through and get signed by Hobbs directly, because some of them just seem common sense to most voters. You mentioned, voter ID. You mentioned no foreign funding, which is a real issue. In fact, we did a big dive on this last year, looking into money entering the political system here in Arizona, and come to find out that there's actually a non-U.S. citizen, a billionaire, a foreign billionaire, Swiss-born billionaire that is pouring money through various nonprofits that are engaging in our election process here in Arizona. So these are real issues. This isn't theoretical and not happening. But has this just been with the left and the Democrats at the Capitol just opposing every type of common sense reform every step of the way? Every
step of the way. My first year when I got into office and I realized we were going to be in a divided government situation, I really had a hard think to myself. I'd run on a platform of common sense election reform, and I go, okay, what are some things that Democrats should be able to get behind? And I, researched and racked my brain for months, and I finally came up with something that I thought, oh, for sure, Katie Hobbs is going to sign this, which is Arizona at the time didn't have any legally binding rules for how to verify the signature of early voters. So it was a very arbitrary process that both risked impairing the security of our elections and also risked disenfranchising legitimate voters. You have to have clear rules. That's very important for due process. And so I go, well, I know Katie Hobbs is not going to sign off on the kinds of rules that I would like, but she had written a set of rules back in the summer of 2020. When she was Secretary of State. And I go, well, surely she will sign off on a bill codifying her own rules, because some rules, even bad rules, are better than no rules. And so I sent that bill to her desk. It was a one-line bill. Essentially, it said, the Secretary of State's summer of 2020 signature verification guide, that's how signature verification shall be performed. And after 3 days, she vetoed it. I finally did get rules a year later, but I had to find some leverage to twist her arm about. So if you've got Democrats who will veto their own rules, then there's no way that you can come together in a common ground situation and reform our elections for the good of all Arizonans. It's like anytime Republicans decide we support something, even if it's something that Democrats previously advocated for, at least at the state capitol, they decide that it's the worst thing in the world and they want to oppose it. And then that being said, I've never seen the Democrats in the House more panicked than when the SAVE Act went up on the board for that final time, because they really didn't believe that we were going to be able to get it done. They really thought we were going to be like Washington, D.C. Republicans, all talk and no action. But here in Arizona, Republicans delivered. And I want voters to know that, because I think a lot of voters, they get dispirited. They go, why should I vote? Republicans talk a good game, but they never deliver. That may be true in Washington, D.C. I can tell you it's not true here in Arizona. And I've been fighting for you for 4 years. My Republican colleagues in the House have been fighting for you for the 4 years I've been down there. And we've had a backbone. We've acted the way that you've told us that you'd like Republicans to act. And after 2 years of persistence, I passed the SAVE Act and put it on your ballot so you can choose. So it does matter when you vote, because Arizona Republicans, when we tell you we're going to do something, we do it. And when you get out and vote, you keep those good things going. If you don't, what you're going to get us is 4 more years of Fontes and Hobbs and Chris Mays, and our state's going to continue to go down the toilet the way that it has for the past 4.
Yeah. And you talked about that and delivering. One of the things that impressed me in the development of the FAST Act, getting this referred to the ballot, was that it was a collaborative process. Nobody was excluded. Anybody could have participated in that, pulled people in from not just the House, but from the Senate to present their own ideas on trying to get the best product put together, right? Because I think everybody is on the same page of wanting to solve these problems, but people have different ideas. And it's key to make sure that it's collaborative and were you surprised or did you have a good sense that you would be able to get a collaborative process, bring all Republicans together to get these common sense reforms put in front of voters in November?
Look, I was pleasantly surprised. I'd been trying for 2 years. It had been killed over and over again, sometimes in good faith, more often, in my opinion, in bad faith, because, look, there are folks who want the problems to continue. One of the things that you hear sometimes at the Capitol is, if we solve that problem, then we can't continue to talk about it. And I always stare at people googly-eyed and when they say things like that, and I go, do you know how many problems this state has? We could spend the rest of our lives solving problems that are important to Arizonans and not even make a dent. Mm-hmm. Why don't we get started? Why don't we do it? And a lot of times when a ballot referral goes on the board, it's a foregone conclusion. I tell you, that wasn't. I was negotiating with the last holdout during my floor speech. Okay? In the middle of my floor speech, she came over to ask me a question, and I had to stop and negotiate with her because it was that important to my constituents to get it done and give you the choice, right? So what we hear from people that they're frustrated. They voted for Republicans to deliver things like common sense election security. But then Republicans don't give it to them. They just ask for money so that they can do it next time. And I was so sick and tired and embarrassed that we hadn't done that. And so that's why I put in all the effort that was required. And it was an enormous amount. But at the end of the day, we got it done. And I got to say, the Free Enterprise Club, enormous help with that. I mean, your guys' expertise, your guys' ability to help us with votes, to message to the public about it was invaluable. For getting this reform onto voters' ballots. And we know that it's wildly popular. Voters are going to prove it in November. And there's also a component I didn't talk about, which was that it speeds up our election results.
Yes.
And what we heard loud and clear from voters, and this was a part that really took years of work in the process, was they wanted faster results, but they didn't want to lose any options in terms of the way that they voted. Okay? And we heard that loud and clear. So what we realized that we could do was we could give voters faster results by improving the back end of the process that's not voter facing. And we had election officials howl about that, or at least a few of them howl about that because it's more work for them. But what we heard from voters is we want more work for them. We don't want more work for us. And at the end of the day, I work for the voters. That's what the voters wanted. That's what's going to be on your ballot.
Yeah, and you talked about the voter ID and how important that is, stopping foreign funding. But what you just described, this issue on making sure we're getting election results on election night. And that is a bipartisan issue. In fact, you talk to anyone out there that's just an average voter. Heck, the New York Times wrote an op-ed about this when last election, it was taking weeks for us to get election results on how we were the punchline to jokes. We were a national laughingstock because we can't figure out who wins our elections. And if you want to destroy faith in our process, that is one of the best ways to do it because then people look at it and go, what is going on? Something doesn't seem right. You want to eliminate that suspicion. Make sure you're trying to get election results delivered on election night. And in this measure, allowing people to tabulate their ballots that they get their early ballots, let them tabulate them on site, which is what it does. Many other states allow for that to happen. You can go in, get your ballots tabulated right on site. You know they're counted. You know it's counted accurately. That to me is one of the best provisions that were included with this. It will speed up those election results and it's common sense. And again, will be actually another convenience option for voters that they don't currently have. And it was a little frustrating seeing the pushback from the election officials. From our perspective, most of that pushback, was I think some election officials just don't like change. They don't like the additional step that that'll create for them. But as you mentioned, that's not the priority here. The priorities are the voters themselves and making sure they have the system's easy for them to use. And oh, by the way, they're getting instant results.
And I do want to shout out a couple of great elections officials who did understand that and understood the paramount importance of restoring this trust and confidence in our system. Because at the end of the day, that's one of the important reasons that we have elections, is so that everybody feels like their voice has been freely and fairly represented according to the law. And so people like Maricopa County Recorder Justin Heap, Yuma County Recorder David Laura, and now Navajo County Recorder David Marshall. These are all folks who really went to bat to help us get this through, fighting with some of the the more liberal members, shall we say, of the Pima County, like the Pima County recorder, who was dead set against this. And so I do want to say there are some good folks working in our elections offices at high levels, and there's more of them than there used to be. Mm-hmm. And we can keep that up by putting in place a Secretary of State who's competent and will follow the law and protect every voter regardless of party.
Yeah, and you talked about some of that opposition from the left. Adrian Fontes was helping to spearhead it, and that opposition was culminating. They were trying to do their own ballot measure. In fact, for the last several months, they've been out pushing a citizens initiative to do their own version of what they think will make our election system better. But got great news this week, found out that they're not turning in their signatures. They're not going to try to qualify for the ballot. But that was, from our perspective, the vision of what they wanted to see. And do you want to describe a little bit about what they wanted to do to our election system and why that would have just been a catastrophe if that measure, what they wanted to do, was actually put into law?
Well, I think it's important to talk about who is they. And the person behind the left's failed ballot measure is Adrian Fontes. He used taxpayer funding in his office's official accounts to promote his measure and advocate for the defeat of our measure, which is
totally new. Up until Adrian Fontes, not even Katie Hobbs would regularly, when she was secretary, would regularly be weighing in on proposed measures on the ballot, because the precedent was you don't want to make it look like the head election official was putting their thumb on the scale when it came to anything that's going to appear on the ballot. Along comes Adrian Fontes, and he weighs in on almost every single issue and is proactively campaigning for them.
Exactly right. And the reason that he was campaigning for this radical measure is that he wants California-style elections here. We all saw how the LA mayor's race turned out and all of the failures of that process. And it's important to recognize that the Department of Justice came out with a statement and said the reason that California suffered this failed election was because they don't have universal government-issued ID for every ballot cast. Well, guess what? We don't either. And so what the FAST Act's going to do is it's going to prevent us from ever having a California-style catastrophe in this state. Now, what Fontes wanted to do was essentially give his allies at Lucha and Mi Familia Vota carte blanche to go in to the courts and have them strike down any election security law on the books that they didn't like. It would have been lawless and chaotic. And I'm glad that he got rejected by the voters with his measure, just like he's going to be rejected by them in November.
Yeah, it was clear voters didn't want to sign that thing. And one of the provisions in there is it would have permanently locked into our Constitution our current tabulation process, which means we would have never been able to change the system ever again to speed up election results. We would have been stuck with this. We're not finding out until Christmas who's winning some of these races. And so thankfully, voters saw through it, didn't sign their measure, and it got junked.
Yeah, it did. I really like the statement that they put out when it got junked too. They go, well, we had enough signatures, but definitely not enough valid signatures. I go, okay, well, who are you getting to sign this thing? If you had enough signatures, but definitely not enough valid ones, this is why we need to have the FAST Act, because we've got to make sure that only lawful votes are being cast in our process. And right now, Adrian Fontes has been totally derelict in those duties. In fact, under federal law, he's supposed to oversee our state's voter roll cleanup. He has ultimate responsibility for that. He hasn't been doing it at all. In fact, he told Citizen AG that he had no records of his compliance with that federal law. So he's not making sure that we only have people who are lawfully registered participating in the process. Rather, he's trying to give anyone carte blanche to vote, whether they're a citizen or not, whether they live in Arizona or not. Mm-hmm. Again, that is way too radical for Arizona. He needs to be rejected.
So you could have stayed in the legislature, continued to serve there. But last year, you decided that you wanted to step up and run for the Secretary of State's office. Why did you decide to run? What was the inflection point? What made you say, I got to go do this?
One of the things that being in the legislature has really impressed upon me is you could write the best law in the world, but if you don't have a competent elections administrator who will follow the law, who is always going to try to twist and distort the law, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. And that's something that had really frustrated me about passing all of these good laws, because I have managed to leverage Katie Hobbs to sign a few of my very good bills. And when we have really good people like Justin Heap administering them, it works out incredibly well. So the signature verification rules I got in as a minimum standard, for example, he's now improved on that process, built a robust process around that. That's wonderful. That's what you want to see. If everybody was a Justin Heap, I'd stay in the legislature forever. But it's not the case. And what is the case is that Adrian Fontes has been twisting and distorting the law to the point where passing new laws is not as effective as it could be. Besides which, this guy's been a bête noire of mine for 6 years. I've had to take him to the Arizona Supreme Court when he tried to seize the power to decide how a voter intended to vote, if you can believe that. I mean, it was just nuts. Beat him there. Had to take him to court again when he tried to ban protests in city centers on election day and criminalize criticism of any elections official. In that case, we prevailed against him in front of an all-Democrat panel of judges on the Ninth Circuit, which was no easy feat, but that's how extreme this guy is. And I go, it's a full-time job just cleaning up after his messes. Mm-hmm. If I was Secretary of State, I could just do Secretary of State as a full-time job, and I wouldn't have to spend 40 hours a week dealing with Fontes. And so for me, it just got to the point where I go, no more of this. It's time for him to go. It's time for me to take him out and restore elections to our state that everybody can be proud of.
Yeah, and we found ourselves in the same boat as well. We, over the last couple of years, have had to sue him on a couple different occasions because of actions he has taken in the office, cases that we prevailed on in court on free speech, First Amendment grounds. From our perspective, he's just been a disaster in making sure that people are able to participate and know that the system that we have for an election system we can rely on. If he's continues able to serve past this term and goes on for another 4 years, what do you think will be the biggest threat? Like, what has he gotten wrong, and what do you think he'll make even worse if he ended up getting reelected?
He's pushing, along with some of his fellow Democrat secretaries of state, for a vote by text system. You can just text in your vote from your phone, which is incredibly easy to hack. I mean, trivial. Incredibly insecure, incredibly hard to make sure that the voter who is lawfully registered. So he wants to make
voting like American Idol.
He wants
to you can go in there and just vote, and you trust it. Just trust the system.
Yeah, exactly. Just no transparency in a vote by text system. There's no chain of custody. Third-party vendors can see the way that you vote, so there's no privacy. But this is what the guy wants, because again, he wants to turn our elections into California, so that eventually he can achieve his goal of being Governor Zoran Mondani or Governor Adrian Fontes. But I repeat myself, this is the guy's ultimate goal. He's got a radical, far left, democratic socialist vision, and maybe not democratic socialist vision for the state of Arizona, where he doesn't really believe in things that Arizonans believe in, like the free enterprise system, like constitutional rights for every citizen. He thinks he knows best. He's a very arrogant man in that way. And so he wants to be in a position to transform the state into the vision. That's why we have to stop him here, and we have to stop him now. The good news is this guy has never been successfully reelected. He served one failed term as Maricopa County recorder, and he was booted out on his butt by the voters of Maricopa County, who are pretty representative of the state's voting population as a whole, because he just flagrantly disregarded the laws. I mean, Brnovich's office had to take him to court because he tried to illegally print 300,000 ballots that he had no legal authority to print.
During COVID, they tried to make up the excuse he was going to mail ballots to every voter in Maricopa County, which was blatantly illegal. And yeah, Brnovich and others had to intervene on that to get him to stop before he did it.
That's right. And they did great work on that case. But this is the thing. You're never going to be able to catch every single thing. There's a limitation in resources in terms of the conservative legal movement. And eventually, he's going to do something that gets through. He's already done things that have transformed our system for the worse. And as long as he remains in there, he's a threat to every Arizonan's confidence in our election system and every Arizonan's civil rights, regardless of party.
So you get elected, you're in the Secretary of State's office, top issue day one, what do you want to do?
Clean up the voter rolls. So Look, I've been involved in the election integrity movement for a long time. And there's a lot of things that people manifest as concerns, right? They go, well, some people are concerned about mail-in voting. Some people are concerned about machines. And when you actually look at the root cause of those concerns, right? These are the things people think they're concerned about. But what they're really saying, even though they don't always know it, is what they're concerned about is the voter rolls. Because if you only have lawful registrants on the voter rolls, kind of hard to mess around with the mechanism of voting. It's kind of hard to mess around with mail-in ballots, for example, right? If there's only lawful registrants, then every ballot's attached to somebody who's legally entitled to vote. And when we go in there and we clean up the voter rolls, we're going to be able to restore confidence in every facet of Arizona's election system, including our vote by mail process, which Arizonans overwhelmingly take advantage of. So that's a very important thing that we need to do. But right now, we're in a situation where Justin Heap came in as Maricopa County Recorder. He's the first really good, honest, smart, competent guy we've had in there in quite a while. And in his first year and change in office, he's already identified and removed 500,000 names on the voter list that shouldn't have been there. That's like 20% of every name that was on Maricopa County's voter rolls was not supposed to be there. How can you have confidence in any aspect of the system until that happens? So cleaning up the voter rolls, day one, priority.
Yeah, and I'm glad that's one of your priorities. We had a couple of years ago sent a letter and actually ended up filing a lawsuit related to that issue to Adrian Fontes because we identified a few different counties in Arizona that had more people registered to vote and on the voter rolls than the census tract indicated that were even eligible to be registered to vote in those counties. It was clear that there were active and inactive voters that had to have been listed, still on the rolls, that had not been properly removed as required by law. And Adrian Fontes fought that request to remove those names and take that action tooth and nail. Opposed it, fought us in court on that as well, too. He has shown zero interest in wanting to make sure that only voters that are eligible to be on the rolls remain on the rolls. But lastly, let's get into let's do some lightning round questions. Let's do quick questions, 1-2 sentence answers, and let me see where you fall on them. So, Secretary of State's race, why does it matter in 2026? Why should voters care and make sure they make the right choice?
Look, I understand that elections administration is not the thing that gets the pulse of every Arizonan pounding. But I guarantee you care about something that the president or Congress or the state legislature or the governor touches. What Arizonans need to understand is the Secretary of State is not just the chief elections officer of Arizona. The Secretary of State is the most important chief elections officer in the world because the road to the White House runs directly through that office. The road to the congressional majority runs directly through that office. And if you don't have a competent Secretary of State who's dedicated to following the law, then what you don't have also is elections for president or Congress or legislature or governor that voters can have confidence in. And over time, that really degrades our fellow feelings as Americans. It really degrades the way that our system is supposed to function, and it makes people cynical and drop out of participation. That's not a healthy recipe for the long-term success of a democracy and a republic. So my pitch to voters is Secretary of State is the most important race on any ballot anywhere in the world this cycle. And I'd encourage your viewers to get involved with our race because we could use all the help we can get. As you mentioned, there's foreign billionaires pumping funding into our elections. Some of that makes its way to Mr. Fontes. He raises a ton of out-of-state money. And all I've got is the voters of Arizona who are ready for change. So if people want to check us out, figure out ways they can help, they can go to our website, alexforaz.com, ALEXFORAZ.com.
Biggest myth pushed by those that say that our current system is safe, secure, and reliable, and we don't need any changes.
Well, you just said the biggest myth.
The question answered itself?
Yeah, I mean, look, our current system is none of those things. Unfortunately, I wish it were. But we saw in 2022 with Abe Hamadeh that voters were getting turned away at polling places and judges were refusing to order their votes to be counted because of a back-end glitch with the MVD system, because of Hobbs and Fontes. Well, that back-end glitch is still there. I'm still fielding calls for voters who are like, why is my registration status inactive? Why am I getting these notices? And it's because they've refused to fix that. We've seen, obviously, them go to court against you and many others to resist any effort to take invalid registrants off of our voter rolls and ensure only lawful Arizona citizens are on those rolls. This is not acceptable. This is not something that, frankly, it constitutes a system that I want to hand down to my kids. And I don't want them to hand it down to their kids. I remember growing up, we were very proud on election day. And we were also proud that our system worked really well. I mean, when I started voting, I remember that was a source of pride. Florida, well, they have their problems, but gosh, in Arizona, voting works really well. And over time, that's changed. What we have to understand is the eyes of the nation are upon us now. And it's time to operate at the level of importance that we've risen up to as a state. Adrian Fontes is not capable of doing it. His only career experience prior to becoming Secretary of State or county recorder was that he was a cartel lawyer for the Sinaloa drug cartel. This is not a guy who has the competence to be a great elections administrator, even if he wanted to be, but that's exactly what our state needs.
Most important race on the ballot outside of your own?
I would say that would be for governor. Governor, absolutely. My job would become a lot easier when we have Andy Biggs as governor. He's somebody who I've admired for a very long time, and I have a great working relationship with. But he's going to be able to make sure that when we do need legislative changes, because I respect the fact that the Secretary of State is not a policy position. It's not a lawmaking position. It is essentially a law enforcement position. The legislature makes the laws. We make sure that they're properly executed. But when there needs to be legal changes to improve that voter experience, I know that Andy Biggs is somebody I'm going to be able to work very collaboratively with to get that done for the people of Arizona.
Will you debate Adrian Fontes?
I've already debated Adrian Fontes twice. The first time he left in the middle of the debate, he walked off the stage. And the second time he at least stayed till the end and then stormed off in a huff with his back hunched over. The truth of the matter is, Adrian...
Do you think he'll debate you in the general?
I don't know about that. We're gonna find out the answer to that question. See, here's his problem. He's never gone up against a Republican who was an expert in elections. So he doesn't know what to do. He can't just, spread his lies and not get called out on it, because I got the receipts. And so whenever he talks, I can refute him. And that's what's happened when we've debated, is he's been shown to be the clown that he is. So I do wonder whether he'll debate me. But if he will, I'm going to be so excited to take that on again.
Final pitch. Why should Arizonans vote for the FAST Act in November?
Well, you should vote for the FAST Act in November, because at the end of the day, these are your elections. And you've been telling us that you want elections that are more secure. You've been telling us that you want elections that give you a faster result. And this is my very best effort to give you what you tell me that you want. So really, I wrote this for you, and so I could give you the choice to have these things. And I know that you do want them. We've been around the state. We've asked everybody, and everybody says, yes, we need to have that confidence in the system. Yes, we need to have that security. And people trust themselves, I think quite rightly, much more than they trust the legislature or any elected official. So you now have the power in your hands to reform the system the way that you want it. And I humbly ask that you vote for the FAST Act, because you're going to be very proud of your elections when you do, especially when you have me to administer your new law.
Alex, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Scott.
And everyone watching, thank you for joining us here in the State Room, where we cover all the key issues and events that will help keep Arizona free. Thank you.